Hello again, YouTube. DJ Ultimate, SoundFire DJ, and it's been well over a year since I posted any long-form content on my YouTube channel. I've been posting a few shorts lately that I posted on TikTok, but I wanted to come back today and give a revisit to something I reviewed over a year ago, back in December of 2021. I'm kind of coming back today to do a long-term review, and it is of the SoundSwitch Control One. Before I get into this review about the SoundSwitch Control One, I do feel it's important to state that I am not affiliated with SoundSwitch. SoundSwitch has not paid me to do any reviews. Everything that I have from SoundSwitch, I purchased with my own money, and this review comes from my own honest opinions and observations. So take that as you will and enjoy the rest of the review. This is the same unit I had back when I pre-ordered it. Same one, okay? It's looking pretty close to new. I usually keep these plastic things on the screens because I figure it protects the screens longer, but as you can see, it's starting to peel off, so I should probably just peel it off, but maybe I'll do that at the end of the video if you want to watch me peel that sticker off. Well, let's talk about it a little bit. So what do we think of the long-term review of the SoundSwitch Control One? And if you'd like to see the more in-depth stuff, keep watching, but I'll give you the short synopsis summary right now just to help all of you that have short attention spans. So the synopsis is it worth it? Yes, it's still worth it. A year later, is it still the best controller for SoundSwitch? Yes, it is. I'm going to get into why on that and tell you about what I found using it. And who knows, this might answer some questions for some of you that are trying to get into it now and want to know what are some of the more powerful features and things that you can do with this lighting controller with the SoundSwitch software. So starting out, addressing some of the things I talked about in the first review video. One of the first things that I mentioned in there is this touch strip right here and how responsive it is. And I want to give a kudos to SoundSwitch because they came out with a couple firmware updates for this thing shortly after I left my review. In fact, one of the firmware updates was literally the day I left the review, and then they came out with another firmware update, I want to say not too much longer after that. I could be wrong, so correct me if I'm wrong. But in my first review, I noticed how this touch strip button would just get really buggy and not follow your finger. You could just hold your finger in one spot, and this indicator light indicating where it's reading your finger was jumping all over the place. They fixed that. So thank you to SoundSwitch. We appreciate that. So this fader is a lot better than what it used to be. It still lags a little bit, like you notice there when I go all the way to the bottom sometimes. It didn't register, but now it is. And also getting all the way to the top, you kind of have to push your finger all the way up into that very top little corner to get it to go up to the max. So is it perfect? No. Is it better than what it was when I first reviewed it? Absolutely. Thank you, SoundSwitch. We appreciate that. Secondly, is the thing I talked about with the buttons being, the word I used was squidgy. That's still true. Don't take it the wrong way, SoundSwitch. I still love you, and I'm going to get to why I still think SoundSwitch is the best thing out there for mobile DJs. But in my time of using this, and this kind of goes back to when I first got it, and I compared to what I was using before this, which was a couple of MIDI fighter controllers from DJ Tech Tools. Shout out to DJ Tech Tools. I'm using their chroma cable right here, and they've got a lot of good stuff. So I definitely love their MIDI fighter stuff, their chroma cables, really, really good stuff. So what I loved about the MIDI fighter is the fact that it had those highly responsive arcade style buttons on it that if I wanted to set a lighting effect to one of those buttons, like let's say just a white flash of light, kind of like a strobe effect, I could just reach down and I could tap that thing about as fast as my fingers could go, and the lights would follow what I was tapping as fast as the DMX wireless stuff could keep up with it. You know how it is sometimes with that stuff. Wired, of course, is always better than wireless, but it did a really good job. A good example of this was, again, in the song Uptown Funk, when you have those band hits where it goes da 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 da. Okay, don't believe me, just watch da 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 da. All right, I would like to do the flashes of white in sync with those band hits. So you go da 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 on the button. Well, can you do that with this white button here? You can, but it's hard because of the feel of the button, because of how the mechanism. It's like going between a mechanical keyboard and a laptop keyboard. Let's say that, okay? A lot of people prefer mechanical keys for a reason, because they're crisper, they have the better travel, okay? They like them for that stuff. Whereas other keyboards, like on most laptops, it's a shorter travel, it's more tappy, it's not as always as responsive. So that's kind of like this thing here. This is like the laptop keyboard version, where if they had a button that was more springy and responsive to the touch, maybe like in a Kai pad or a MIDI fighter style button there that would respond and bounce back quickly, that would be way better. I also think the buttons white and blackout should be bigger, because those are the two buttons that you're going to use more than any of the other color buttons. I'm saying that right now. Those buttons should be emphasized so that you can see them and reach them and hit them when you need to. Okay, having said that, there's two other things that I really want to touch on that I really think make this controller really worth it, very powerful to have by your DJ gear when you're DJing to control your lighting. The first thing that I'm going to talk about is the moving head movement generator. So SoundSwitch, the way it's worked from the beginning is that you would set a position you want your moving heads to go. You'd set a position, and then you could set different variable effects, like you could tell the moving head what color you wanted it to be. SoundSwitch kind of did that automatically if you had a general color for all the lights set out, but you could set what gobo if you wanted the prism on. You could set all those different variables too, but the main thing you were setting with a moving head were the cue points, and this is important to remember. It's a cue point for the position of where you want the moving head to go and point. And this cue point is based on the XY axis, so you actually set up what these cue points are and what XY axis it's going to point that moving head to before you put the cue points in the time the timeline. We're going to call it the timeline because it is like a timeline. It's based on measures of music. So an 8-bar count or a 16-bar count, it does either one. Now, how many of these cue points you put in an 8-bar count or a 16-bar count of music is going to determine how quickly your moving heads move. Because if you just put in 2 cue points in a 16-bar movement and your moving heads just have to go from like here to here, they're going to move very slowly unless your tempo is crazy high. But they're going to move very slowly across those 2 cue points because they're trying to reach that in that given amount of time, those 2 points. Now, if you add a bunch of other cue points in that make them go way up, make them circle around, whatever, then they're going to start moving faster because they have to cover more area in a shorter amount of time. So if you're trying to program your moving heads in your auto loops, which are the default loops it goes to if you don't have a pre-scripted track, lighting track or program for a song when you load it, then you're going to need to put more or less of those cue points in for the lighting to follow in order to make the lighting move slower or faster. That's how it works. Now, since I don't know which update of SoundSwitch it was, they did add a movement generator to the lighting. And a movement generator to the lighting is essentially, if you've used other DMX software that had a movement generator in it, I mean, there's even like, some of the free ones like QLC Plus, or I can't remember the other one that a lot of people use. It's Windows-based, but anyway, there's an XY grid, and you'll put a shape in that XY grid, like a circle, a square, a diamond, a figure 8, and your moving heads, you'll tell your moving heads to follow this figure 8 or circle pattern or whatever shape you got, and you'll see usually like a little dot following the line of that shape in the movement generator. Well, SoundSwitch has this now too. What SoundSwitch did to make that easily accessible is they put it right here, this button that says movement, on the controller. And when you press it, watch the screen on the top where it says control right now. It's going to change. It changes to these two parameters, movement speed and size. And there's one other very important factor that you got to remember when using this. You got to have a position for your lighting. So when does this come in handy for me personally? Slow songs. I have to go into my SoundSwitch and edit a little bit more my low energy slow sound bank. And we'll talk about banks in a little bit too. But what sometimes happens in some of my low energy banks is that my movement head cue points, there's still too many of them, and my moving heads are moving around way too much. So I'll sometimes have to go and override that. And the way I do that is I hit movement. By pressing movement, it's going to go to a default pattern or movement generator pattern that you've got set in SoundSwitch. It can be the circle, the figure eight, the square, whatever, all right? And then it's going to give me these two variables that I can set with these two encoder knobs. It's going to give me movement speed and size. Okay, now, what's the next part that's important? I have to override the cue points for the movement of the moving heads. The way I do that is by pressing Shift, holding it down. You'll notice now that all of my color lights went white. There's a reason for that, because now I'm queuing up what positions are being put into the moving heads. So I want it to stay on one position typically. So I'll pick a random one, right? As long as it's kind of facing the audience or maybe going over the heads or whatever, something that looks really nice. So I'll click like position 4 here, right? And now my moving heads are going to stay on that position. Meanwhile, the movement generator is going to use that position as a central reference point and then work the pattern on the movement generator, the circle, figure eight, or whatever, using that reference point as the center of it. So if my center is, dead level straight ahead, pointing straight ahead, both moving heads shooting out like laser beams on a Star Destroyer, let's say, over the heads of the audience. That's where it's going to say is 0. If I have it where they're straight up, that's going to be like the 0 point for this. And then the movement generator, let's say it's a circle, is going to move those moving heads in a circle around that point. So if you see them, if your central point is straight up, they're going to kind of do this like circular motion on the ceiling like this. If they're pointed straight ahead, they're going to go like this, okay? Or more accurately, like this, creating a cone shape, if you will. Now, movement speed and size is going to do the two things. It's going to determine how fast it goes around that circle, and then the size is how big is the cone shooting out from it in this example. And you can dial that in so you can get more or less, right? And you can do that all on the fly, which is really good because lighting, if it's not set up right, can ruin the mood. It can ruin the mood to a song. If you've got a nice, slow, romantic song on, everybody's grabbing their partner to come on the dance floor, but your moving heads are moving like they're in a rave, you've effed up, okay? I'm just going to say it. You effed up. So to be able to override that and fix that right away is going to make that error minimal. The guests will notice, those moving heads move kind of fast, but they seem like okay now. Maybe they just, fritzed out for a second. It happens. And people will let it go. But if you leave it that way the whole song, you're going to have people who are like, I'm trying to dance here, and that thing keeps shining in my face like really fast and flashing bright, and it's awful. Okay. So that's movement. Now we're going to talk a little bit about static scenes. Static scenes is another really, really huge feature that this controller really comes in handy for, okay? So first thing I'm going to talk about before I get to static scenes are the banks. We've got 4 banks. Below that, we've got all the auto loops that are under each bank, okay? So I usually have like bank 1 be the slow songs, bank 2, actually it's the other way around. I have banks 1 and 2 being like really high energy stuffs, and then bank 3 is kind of like my hip hop mid-tempo kind of bank, and then bank 4 is my low energy slow songs typically, okay, when I don't want my lights going nuts. If I need to do a static scene, which This is really handy for when you're running uplighting. In fact, I think SoundSwitch pretty much added this feature because of uplighting. You want to have all your uplights set to a certain color during dinner and during cocktail hour, because obviously, you typically don't want the uplights acting like they're at a dance party during that time. In the software in SoundSwitch, you go create this static scene. And the cool thing is that, let's say you still want your lights to be able to be in party mode, for the Grand March, let's say, but you want the uplights to stay the same. You can do that. SoundSwitch can make it where all you got to do is go to the settings and tell it which lights you want it to grab a hold of and keep static. Static obviously meaning that they don't change. And it'll do that, meanwhile letting all the other lights go nuts when you want them to, when you're playing a song. So I'll go on my Control One, I'll go on my software, I'll set my static scene, and I usually always have 2 static scenes set, especially when I'm running uplighting. The first static scene will usually be the uplighting at whatever color the couple wants. And it'll have all the other lights not doing anything, okay? I'll leave them go, but I'll get to where I keep them from doing something I don't want to in a moment. But it'll just be the uplighting to the color I want. The second static scene I'll create is that same color uplighting for the couple, plus the correct lighting for their spotlight dances. So first dance, parrot dances, and this is huge. This is one of the reasons why more photographers in Northeast Wisconsin recommend us pretty much more than any other DJ company. It's because we don't screw up their pictures, and we even set our lighting to make their pictures better. So we use the static scene to do that. And usually what we do is we have our lights set to like a nice warm white or a neutral 5500 degree Kelvin white. And then we'll have it so our moving heads are not moving around, so that if the couple stays in a certain spot, we'll usually kind of tell them where to stay on the dance floor if they're just going to stand and spin in a circle for 3 minutes. We'll have it so that the spotlights do this beautiful like highlight across the dance floor, but it's not hitting the couple, so you're not getting a big white hot spot on them during their first dance. Now, sometimes I'll have a photographer that wants the spotlights on them during the first dance because they're only going to shoot from the angle of the point of view of the audience. But most of the time, they like to get behind the DJ booth and shoot the angle looking at the audience too. So that's why we keep the spotlights off the couple. That is set as my second static scene. And the neat thing is that on this controller, you've got this button right here for the auto loops, okay? By pressing that, you tell these buttons and everything below if you want to be in auto loop mode or static scene mode. Static scene mode, these buttons go dark, and now all of these buttons down here recall 32 different static scenes that you can program and recall on this controller. So I'll usually set those first 2. Uplighting with the first dance scene, or if I'm not running uplighting for that particular couple, the first dance scene, okay? And then I'll usually have a third one and a fourth one for different purposes, like end of the night photo, or if I need to, if the photographer, if I think that they're going to want the lighting a little more dim, I'll have a copy of the first dance scene with a different percentage of level of the lighting. Of course, the cool thing is that I can also just adjust that now with this touch strip, and the touch strip works pretty effectively that I can adjust that. So again, thank you SoundSwitch for fixing that. Now, there's one other button on here that I think is really important to have and really useful, and that is this button right here. This button is a lifesaver. It is the play pause button. Essentially, again, SoundSwitch, the way it's designed is it's designed to work almost like your lighting is a musical instrument accompanying, I can't say that word tonight. Accompanying? Yeah, whatever. You know what I'm trying to say. It's accompanying the music. Your lighting is accompanying the music. And this button right here tells it whether it should continue to play with your music or not. That's a lifesaver, because sometimes when you're working behind your DJ booth and you have this sitting next to your turntables and you got an assistant and they're trying to pick stuff up, put stuff down, whatever. Maybe they set something on here, or they drop something on this, and now it presses a different button. And all of a sudden, that's a different static scene or an unprogrammed static scene, and your lights just completely go off. And now everybody's like, what the heck just happened? Well, guess what? Because you had this button set to pause, you now prevented that catastrophe from happening. And is it possible in the grand scheme of things for somebody to press this button and then press one of these buttons? Yeah, but it's highly unlikely. So this is a lifesaver. And what I also love about it is that it also saves you from yourself. So if you're thinking like, shoot, do I have this thing in the right mode? And you have it in pause mode, but you can still, of course, change the parameters on this while it's in the pause mode and see like, oh, shoot, is this right? Okay, now that's right. And then which one do I need again? Is it this one or is it this one? Yeah, I think it's that one. Okay, great. You're not changing your lights on the dance floor at the same time because you have it paused. It's not going to send any output DMX signals or change the output DMX signal because you've got it locked in. So again, that's a lifesaver for, your up lights not doing some weird stuff during dinner, or the first dance that all of a sudden, somebody accidentally hits one of these buttons and now you've got like a rave going during the first dance. It saves you from that stuff. So use that feature. It's hugely important. And again, having this controller here where everything's laid out, the buttons are, labeled and they're stenciled with the lighting behind them so you can see it. It really is the best thing for SoundSwitch. So again, to answer the question of what I said earlier, is it still worth it? 1,000% yes. Do I hope that SoundSwitch and InMusic will make a Mark II or version 2 of this with better buttons, especially on the black and white color, or the blackout and the white bright light color? Absolutely, that would be amazing. I also think that this is one other small thing, is the strobe button should be a different color. Like, to me, the strobe button is almost like the master arm switch in a sense on a jet fighter, where you've got to flip a clear cover up and then press it to press it. The fact that the strobe can be set to be toggled on and off, or it's press and hold it to turn it on and off. So that's good that you can program that in SoundSwitch that way. However, I just think the placement of where it is, because they put it right underneath, right in the middle here. I don't know. It just seems like a weird placement. I feel like the strobe should have a different spot where that you're going to reach for that strobe when you need to hit it, just like the black and white buttons. So that's just me. Other people might be different. You might be different. I don't know. Tell me what you think in the comments below of some of these feedbacks that I've made about this particular device with the black and the white buttons, the strobe button. I think the play pause button is perfect, that it's separated far away from the bottom of the device, so that's kind of tucked up out of the way. That might be cool to actually have the little cover over the play pause button. I don't know. That also might be another thing that breaks off, and then people are like, well, it broke off on my SoundSwitch controller. But I do really like that. I just think the strobe white and black need to be different. So yeah, that's about it. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching my long-term review of the SoundSwitch Control One. Definitely get one if you're not using SoundSwitch and you're a Serato or virtual DJ user, and I think they also support Traktor. You should be using this. It is the best lighting software for mobile DJs, period. There's no question about it. It's the easiest thing to use. It's also just takes so much of the worry away from what your lighting is doing, as long as you take some time to set it up a little bit ahead of time. The fact that you can auto script a lot of songs and have that saved light show for the song, that when you open that song automatically in your DJ software, it's pulled up. It's just awesome. So definitely get into it. Get the Control One until they put something better out there. And SoundSwitch, if you're listening, leave me a comment as well. I appreciate you guys. Thanks so much. Make sure, hey guys, I'm about to do this, but make sure you like this video and hit subscribe on my channel, please. Again, really helps my channel. It doesn't cost you a thing, but it means everything to me. I really appreciate it. So Here we go, guys. Okay, it's happening. It's going away. There it is. No more protection from that little thin film of plastic. So thanks again for watching. Take care.